Kid's about 8, 9 years old in school, has no friends, a little bit awkward, a good student or a poor student. And someone says, they hear about a disease where kids can sometimes be pretty smart. Asperger Syndrome? Asperger. When do you start diagnosing that? People have it, don't be called a syndrome or a disease. They take it as an insult. All we're trying to do is put a group of similar characteristics together, and maybe we can find out why. We're not trying to do it to say you are a problem. You're a human being who has some issues.
Right.
What would make you suspect that that child has some issues that we're going to label that syndrome? What would be in your head?
I would be very concerned with a lack of friends. I would be concerned with a lack of friends and a sadness about a lack of friends. So, there are people who really don't like people. There are 10-year-olds who could care less. They're very content being at home on their Game Boys and their video games.
They could be perfectly okay.
But there are people who are 9 and 10 who have no friends and will say, I don't have any friends. Be sad about not having friends. They will have, typically they'll have some literal language confusion. They have a very hard time with the more abstract parts. They'll do a lot of what we call this lack of theory of mind.
Kid fits that right now. And someone who's a cousin in your family calls you, what would you tell them to do?
I would ask them to go get an evaluation.
Where would you go for that evaluation? Who would be the right kind of, would it be a Ph.D. neurologist, a psychiatrist?
Somebody, again, who has good experience in autism spectrum disorder.
Can't just be anyone. It's someone that knows that subject.
Yeah, because typically what will happen is if it's just a pediatrician, they'll say, oh, don't worry, and if it's just the educators, 9 out of 10 times, these kids are actually doing fine on their test scores. They're oftentimes ineligible for
education, but life scores maybe. So here's the question: say the diagnosis comes down, what should they do?
Well, they should probably talk to their educators. Now, remember, Asperger's disorder in the state of New York is not an educational classification, so you're not going to get services with a diagnosis of Asperger's. You would have.
Oh, they're saving money again?
Well, it's just not an educational classification. They'd have to get either services non-IEP driven, like through a 504 plan, or if their social deficits are so significant and their abstract language problems are so significant that they are actually struggling in certain areas. I've got kids, for example, we support kids in schools. We don't have them in the school, but we support them in public schools. And some of our kids who are Asperger's disorder are struggling with things like social studies or math now, even though in first and second they had no problems, but in fourth and fifth, it's no longer I got my answer. It's no longer I can give you it. I have to explain how I got my answer.
Techniques in education that would help a kid that has these kind of issues?
Absolutely. Providing them with really solid social skills training, very good speech-language therapy to work on their abstract language.
So in other words, you get a diagnosis obviously early in a school system that really wants to do the right thing. You could take a kid with this potential and improve his life quality?
100%. Look, I'll be honest with you, people refer to Asperger's disorder oftentimes as high-functioning autism, and those people who are really suffering with their Asperger's disorder really would take exception to this concept of high functioning. Or I shouldn't even say high functioning because they are high functioning typically, but they think it's mild. People refer to it as mild autism. And there are people who have Asperger's disorder who are really leading very sad lives.
Are there different types or different levels of this?
Again, it's a spectrum, So there are people with Asperger's disorder who are married and happily married and have a good job, but they'll talk to you about what their struggles are and how they've learned to compensate for them. But then there are others who are...
But I got some terrible email. We're talking at a syndrome, a disorder. We dehumanize the person. And we're not trying to do that. All we're trying to is put it in a nice, neat category, get it studied, find out what you can do to improve the quality of life. Right. It's not an insult. It's not a negative. That's the only way we make progress. Am I wrong?
I think we're dropping the ball the most with that group of people. I think we have pretty clear documentation that many of them are graduating high school and even college and remaining
In
unemployed.
20 years now, we probably have 60 diseases under that title, 1A, 1B, 2A, 2.
Right.
But please, I want people to realize this. We're not labeling you a problem, disease, a piece of furniture. We're saying some characteristics. Let's put them together and find solutions. So what you have is a problem. Like if you had an infection, you take an antibiotic or whatever you do, it gets better. Find the right services. So the school changes to what you said. They don't label it maybe the way they should. So you don't have to fight to get services.
Right.
It's automatic because a kid who gets a better quality life, gets a better, higher education life,
Sure.
pays more taxes to the state. Everybody's a winner. And you know something? That's what it should be.
Well, at the end of the day, most people want a job that they like and that they can succeed in and that they make the kind of money they want to make. But the problem is that most people will lose their jobs not because of their skill level or lack thereof. Because if you come and work for me and you don't really know what you're doing, I'll teach you what to do. But if you're awkward, if you're socially inappropriate, if you engage in inappropriate social things, you're going to lose your job. And so oftentimes what happens is that a lot of these individuals end up taking lower and lower level jobs because they don't have the social skills that they need to navigate the work environment. And that's because it was never addressed in school.
So the earlier you get them, the more you work with a child that has an issue like this, there's a better chance down the road they'll handle themselves in adulthood where they could function at a higher level job, better quality life.
Right.
That's all we're saying here.
Right.
We're not labeling you as a problem. There's a problem with a human being. And I think down the road, if we get our point across, the school systems react to it. A lot of people have issues as adults don't.
Well, when I was in high school, we used to have individuals who probably today would be classified as Asperger's, and we would just think that they were weird. We thought they chose to say the things they said or act the way they did. And the truth of the matter is, it's an organic disorder, just like autism.
Not their fault.
No, it's a biological disorder, and we can remediate as much as we can, and then we can adapt the rest. But the point is that they should at least have the option to access that treatment. You don't want it? That's fine. There are people, deaf community, many of them, they like being deaf, they have their own community. That is absolutely fine. But if you choose to not want that, you should have that option.
So in other words, you don't have to do what we talked about. But if you want to, or the parents want a better quality, or whatever that is,
Right.
we want to at least give you the opportunity to make your own personal decision. And please don't take it wrong. We're not labeling you a disease or a syndrome. We're labeling a human being who happens to have some issues. And you want to some? Everybody, including me and you. We have some situations we don't work well in.
Right, sure.
Look, I'm a Red Sox fan living in New York. And I have news for you. And I'm a Patriot fan in Giant territory.
Yeah.
I mean,
Go Giants.
see, I have issues. I have to face an email. Don't tell you. But the point is, don't take it wrong. And if we label it early, we get people to maybe say, this is a problem the school should handle. And maybe we make progress if you want it. You don't have, you made a good point about some people blind. What are you making me like a different, I'm born that way. I like the world. I don't see the world. Maybe I'm better off not to see the politicians on TV. The point is, it's your choice. All we're trying to do, if you want to do something a different way, have an opportunity to have a different type of life, and that's your decision, fine. And if you don't, I respect that too.
I just think that people need to know that we have the ability, and we've learned a lot about how to support the growth and development of some of these social problems. And I feel a lot of times parents will be like, well, thank God he's smart, thank God he's getting good grades. But there's a high suicide rate in Asperger's disorder. There's a lot of anxiety, whether it's biological or acquired, and I don't think there's anything probably worse on earth. I think being unemployed, I think, being dumped by your spouse, I think being a Red Sox fan, nothing can compare, in my opinion, to
I get it again.
to being lonely. You know, I think being lonely and feeling like people are constantly making fun of you probably has to be the worst thing on earth. And my suspicion is that some people that are undiagnosed, some kids with Asperger's disorder who are doing fine academically but have no friends and are socially awkward and are aware of it and really wish they had friends, I don't think there's anything worse on earth.
We agree. I thank you, and I hope if anybody sees what we're doing, don't take it the wrong way. If you can agree, you can disagree, but we're trying to at least bring the issues to the point that maybe down the road you see this as worthwhile. And that's all we can do.